I never thought I'd be the kind of man to buy a surveillance camera for my own home. At 64, after 36 years of marriage to Marcella, I believed our house in Richmond was a place of total transparency. But 3 weeks ago, that belief died. I noticed my wife sneaking into our son's room at 2 a.m. I set up a hidden camera, and what I saw destroyed the man I used to be. Before I even tell you what happened, let me ask you this. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most? If you have, you'll feel this story deep in your soul. And if you know that kind of pain, hit subscribe. Not because it helps me, but because stories like this remind us that sometimes silence and strength are the best revenge. I retired 6 months ago from the postal distribution center, expecting a quiet life of fishing and fixing up the porch. Instead, I found a house full of secrets. Our youngest, Terrence, is 24. He's a good kid, but a car accident 3 years ago left him with a traumatic brain injury. He needs help with his meds and his physical therapy. While I was working, Marcella was his primary caregiver. She was the devoted mother. Everyone at church praised her for it. But since I've been home all day, I felt a shift. It wasn't an explosion, it was the silence. Marcella has always been active, but lately she's been acting like a ghost in her own hallways. My son, who used to make steady progress in speech therapy, is suddenly fading. His words are slurred again. He's lethargic. When he looks at me, he's irritable, but when Marcella enters the room, he goes completely still. It's a submissive, fearful kind of still that makes my stomach knot. I'd reach across our bed at night, looking for the woman I've loved for nearly 4 decades, and find nothing but cold sheets. Then, I'd see that sliver of light under Terrence's door. At first, I told myself it was just a mother's love. I told myself I was being a paranoid old man, but the gut doesn't lie. Something was being taken from my son in the middle of the night, and I realized that to save him, I had to stop trusting the woman sleeping, or not sleeping, next to me. The atmosphere in our home changed from a sanctuary to a cage. Marcella started calling herself a night owl, claiming the quiet hours were the only time she could reflect and pray. But I didn't hear any praying. I heard the floorboards creak. I heard the soft click of a door handle. Every night, like clockwork, she would wait until she thought I was in a deep sleep. Around 1:30 or 2 a.m., she would slide out of bed with the grace of a cat. I started staying awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd listen to her footsteps retreat toward Terrence's room. Why was she in there for hours? Why was Terrence so exhausted the next morning that he could barely lift a fork? I started noticing small things. A glass of tea she'd bring him late at night that smelled metallic. The way she'd tuck him, but her hands looked like they were pinning him down rather than smoothing the covers. One morning, I tried to talk to him while Marcella was out grocery shopping. I sat on the edge of his bed and asked, "Terrence, son, how are you feeling? You seem tired lately." He wouldn't even look me in the eye. He stared at the wall, his bottom lip trembling. "Mom says I'm getting worse, Pop. She says my brain is tired of trying." My blood ran cold. The therapist had just told us the opposite 2 weeks prior. When I tried to push further, Terrence flinched. He actually flinched at my touch. "Don't tell her I talked to you," he whispered. "Please. She says it makes you angry when I complain." I never got angry with him. Never. I realized then that my wife wasn't just caring for him. She was building a wall between us. She was whispering in his ear while the rest of the world slept. And whatever she was saying was turning my son against me. I knew then that I couldn't just ask questions anymore. I needed proof. I needed to see what happened when the lights went out. The moment my life truly split into before and after happened in the most ordinary place, our kitchen junk drawer. I was looking for a screwdriver to fix a loose hinge, digging through old menus and rubber bands, when I pulled out a crumpled slip of paper. It was a receipt from a local pharmacy in a part of town we never visit. I smoothed it out, expecting it to be for vitamins or a flu shot. Instead, my heart skipped a beat. It was for a liquid sedative, a high-dosage sleep aid. I checked the date. It had been purchased 4 days ago. Terrence has a very specific list of medications for his brain injury, and I know every single one of them by heart. This wasn't on the list. In fact, his neurologist specifically warned us against heavy sedatives because they interfere with his cognitive recovery. I felt a rush of heat crawl up my neck. I waited until Marcella came into the kitchen, humming one of those hymns that used to sound peaceful but now sounded like a warning. I laid the receipt on the counter. "Marcella, what's this? Since when does Terrence take this?" She didn't even skip a beat. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "That's for me, Clarence," she said, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. "My nerves are shot from playing nurse all day while you're out in the garage. I haven't been sleeping. I bought it to help me get through the night." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Marcella has more energy at 60 than I had at 30. She was up at dawn, scrubbing floors and running errands. She didn't have shot nerves. She had a plan. "You've never had trouble sleeping a day in your life," I said. Her eyes went hard, like two pieces of flint. "Are you calling me a liar in my own kitchen after all I do for this family?" She snatched the receipt and threw it in the trash. That's when I knew. She wasn't taking that medicine. She was giving it to our son. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Marcella standing over Terrence with a medicine cup, watching the light go out of his eyes. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I had been married to this woman for 36 years. We had shared meals, raised 3 girls, and buried our parents together. How could I even think she was capable of this? But the doubt was like a splinter I couldn't pull out. The next morning, I told her I was heading to the hardware store. Instead, I drove 40 minutes into the city to a small tech shop. I walked in and asked for the one thing I never thought I'd own, a hidden camera. The clerk handed me a small black cube. It looked exactly like a standard USB wall charger. You could even plug a phone cord into it. It recorded in high definition and sent the footage to an SD card. I bought it with cash. I didn't want a trail. When I got home, the house was empty. Marcella was at her weekly church auxiliary meeting, a place where everyone thought she was a saint. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the device. I went into Terrence's room. He was sitting in his chair, staring blankly out the window. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. He didn't even turn his head. I found an outlet directly across from his bed. It was partially hidden by a stack of books, but the lens had a perfect unobstructed view of his pillow. I plugged it in. The little red light blinked once and then vanished. As I walked out and closed his door, a wave of nausea hit me. I felt like a criminal. I felt like I was betraying the mother of my children. But then I remembered the way Terrence flinched when I touched his arm, and the way he slurred his words at breakfast. I wasn't betraying her. I was protecting him. I had the trap set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the sun to go down and see which version of my wife walked through that door at 2 a.m. I let that camera run for 4 nights. Those were the longest 4 days of my life. I had to sit across the dinner table from Marcella, watching her pass the mashed potatoes and talk about the Sunday sermon, all while knowing that little black box in the hallway was drinking in the truth. I felt like a double agent in my own living room. By the 5th morning, I couldn't take it anymore. While Marcella was in the shower, I slipped into Terrence's room, grabbed the SD card, and retreated to the garage. My hands were cold as I slid the card into my laptop. I pulled up the first 2 nights. For the most part, it was quiet. At around 1:30 a.m., the door would creak open. Marcella would walk in, her face bathed in the soft glow of the street lamp outside. She didn't turn on the lights. She would just sit on the edge of Terrence's bed, perfectly still, for nearly an hour. She would stroke his hair, but not like a mother comforting a child. It looked intense, like she was checking to see if he was still under her thumb. It was bone-chilling to watch. This was the woman I had slept next to for 36 years, and here she was, acting like a ghost in our son's room while I slept just down the hall. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Was this just a strange way of grieving the son she lost to the accident? I almost turned the video off. I almost convinced myself that I was the villain for spying on her. But then I clicked on the file for the 3rd night, and the air left my lungs. You know what hurts the most? It isn't just what people do to you. It's that even when you see the red flags, you still try to find an excuse for them because you want to stay proud of your family. If you've ever given someone too many chances, you already understand this pain. Don't just scroll past. Subscribe. Join people who've been through it too, because you deserve stories that make you feel seen. The timestamp on the screen read 2:14 a.m. In the video,
The door swung open harder than the nights before. Marcella didn't just sit down this time. She reached out and shook Terrence's shoulder until he groaned, his head lolling on the pillow. He looked completely out of it, his eyes heavy and unfocused. "Terrence, wake up. We need to talk," she whispered. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence of the room. It wasn't the sweet, melodic voice she used at the grocery store. It was cold. It was calculating. "Mama, I'm tired," Terrence mumbled. "My head hurts so bad." "It hurts because you don't listen to me," she snapped back. She leaned in so close, their foreheads were almost touching.
Your father wants to put you in a facility, Terrence. He told me yesterday he can't handle you anymore. He says you're a burden on his retirement, and he wants his freedom back. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I sat there in my cold garage, staring at the screen in total disbelief. I had never said those words. I had never even thought them. My son was my life. But there she was, weaving a web of lies, poisoning his mind against me, while he was too drugged to defend himself. He said that? Terrence's voice broke. He sounded like a terrified 10-year-old, not a 24-year-old man. He's looking at homes in the county right now, she lied, her eyes narrowed. The only reason you're still in this house is because I'm protecting you. But if you tell him about the money I've been moving, or those papers I had you sign when you were foggy, I won't be able to stop him. He'll take you away from me, and you'll be all alone. Do you understand? Only I love you. I had to grip the edge of the workbench to keep from falling off my stool. She wasn't just lying. She was using his brain injury as a weapon to isolate him. She was making me the monster so she could be the only hero he had left. My heart was breaking for my son, but the fire starting to burn in my chest wasn't sadness. It was a quiet, dangerous rage. Watching my son's spirit break on that screen was bad enough, but what Marcella did next made my blood run cold. After she finished filling his head with lies about me wanting to discard him, she reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a small blue plastic medicine cup. "Drink this," she said, her voice dropping into a terrifyingly soft coo. "It'll help the headaches. It'll help you sleep, so you don't have to think about what your father is planning." Terrence looked at the cup with a mixture of fear and desperation. He was so confused, so broken down by her manipulation, that he reached out with a trembling hand and took it.
Within 10 minutes, his eyes rolled back and he was out cold. He didn't just fall asleep, he went under. It was a chemical knockout. Once he was unconscious, the devoted mother mask completely vanished. Marcella stood up and did something that turned my stomach. She reached under Terrence's mattress and pulled out his tablet and his phone. For the next 40 minutes, the camera captured her scrolling through his personal messages. I watched her thumb move aggressively as she deleted things. She was deleting my texts. She was deleting the voice notes from his sisters, Tasha and Keisha. She was even deleting appointment reminders from his physical therapist. She was systematically erasing every connection he had to the outside world, making sure that when he woke up in a drug-induced fog, the only person he saw, heard from, or trusted was her. She was building a prison out of his own bedroom, and she was using a sedative to keep the doors locked. I had seen enough. I shut the laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew I couldn't just confront her yet. I needed to know why. Why was she doing this to our own flesh and blood? I needed the one thing that never lies: the money. The next morning, I didn't drink my coffee. I didn't say a word to Marcella as she hummed her hymns in the kitchen. I just grabbed my keys and drove straight to our bank. We have a joint savings account, but Terrence has his own account, a trust where his disability checks and the settlement money from his accident are deposited. Because of his injury, Marcella and I are both listed as custodians, but I had stepped back and let her handle the day-to-day bookkeeping while I was still working at the post office. I sat down with a personal banker named Andre. I told him I was concerned about unauthorized activity. When Andre pulled up the records for Terrence's account, he went quiet. He turned the monitor toward me, and I felt the floor drop out from under my chair.
Over the last 8 months, the account had been bled dry. It wasn't just a few $100s here and there for groceries. Marcella had been transferring $2,000 to $3,000 every single month into an external account. When Andre traced the destination, it didn't lead to a shopping habit or a secret credit card.
It was an account registered to a man named Deshaun, Marcella's younger brother. Deshaun has been a thorn in our side for 30 years. He's been in and out of legal trouble, always looking for a handout, always running some scam. Marcella always defended him, saying he was misunderstood. But I never imagined she would steal from her own disabled son to fund her brother's lifestyle. She wasn't just protecting Terrence, she was keeping him drugged and isolated so he wouldn't notice his future was being liquidated. Every dollar meant for his long-term care, for his equipment, for his recovery, was being handed over to a criminal who had never worked a day in his life. I walked out of that bank with a folder full of statements and a cold, hard clarity. The woman I had shared a bed with for 36 years was a stranger. She was a thief and a jailer. I went home and sat at the kitchen table, the bank folder in one hand and the SD card in the other. I wasn't the burden she told Terrence I was. I was the reckoning she never saw coming. I sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours before Marcella came home. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the gray afternoon shadows, watching the dust motes dance in the air. I felt a strange, numb calm. It's the kind of feeling you get right before a massive storm hits. The air goes still, the birds stop singing, and you just know everything you own is about to be tested. I laid out the bank statements in a neat row. I put the laptop in the center of the table, the video of the midnight ritual queued up to the exact moment she lied to our son. I felt like a judge preparing a final verdict. Every time I thought about her whispering to Terrence that I wanted to throw him away, a fresh wave of heat surged through me.
36 years. We had built a life on what I thought was a foundation of granite, only to find out she had been digging a tunnel underneath it the whole time. I heard her car pull into the driveway. I heard the light, rhythmic tap of her heels on the walkway. She was probably coming back from another charity event, looking like the pillar of the community everyone thought she was. I stayed perfectly still as she opened the door. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to throw things. I wanted her to see exactly what I saw. I wanted her to look at the wreckage she had made of our family. When the person you love the most becomes the person you fear the most, your whole world flips upside down. I'm standing my ground now, but it's been the hardest walk of my life. If you've ever had to choose peace over people, even family, this channel is your space. Subscribe, not for me, but for every quiet soul who finally decided to take their power back. Your click might be the reminder someone else needs to realize they aren't alone. Marcella walked into the kitchen, humming a hymn. It was a song about grace and mercy, and the irony of it nearly made me sick. She dropped her purse on the counter and didn't notice me sitting in the shadows at first. She was busy checking the mail, her face relaxed and pleasant. "Oh, Clarence, you startled me," she said, her voice light and airy when she finally saw me. "Why are you sitting here in the dark? Are you feeling all right?" "Sit down, Marcella." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The weight of the words was enough to pull the air out of the room. She sensed the tone immediately. The fake pleasant smile didn't fade, but her eyes went hard and sharp. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, smoothing her skirt with a slow, deliberate motion. "I don't like your tone, Clarence. I've had a long day taking care of our son while you've been off doing God knows what in the garage. I'm exhausted." "You're exhausted?" I asked, sliding the folder of bank statements across the table. Is it the caregiving that's tiring you out, or is it the stress of moving $3,000 a month into your brother's account? She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at the papers. She just laughed. A dry, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "Deshaun needed a loan, Clarence. Family helps family. I didn't think I needed to ask permission to help my own brother get back on his feet. You've always been so tight-fisted when it comes to my side of the family." "This isn't my money, Marcella, and it isn't yours. This is Terrence's settlement money. This is his future. And you're bleeding him dry while you tell me I'm the one trying to get rid of him." "Terrence is confused," she said, leaning forward,
her voice dropping into that manipulative whisper I had heard on the tape.
You know his memory isn't what it used to be. He probably told you some story and you've gone and made a mountain out of a molehill. He's been hallucinating lately, Clarence. It's part of his decline.
The level of coldness in her voice was staggering. She was ready to label our son as insane just to cover her tracks. I looked at her and realized there was no woman left in that chair, just a predator trying to find an exit. I didn't get this from Terrence, I said, reaching for the laptop. I got it from the wall charger across from his bed. I hit the play button. The kitchen, which had been filled with Marcella's sharp defensive excuses, suddenly filled with the sound of her own whispering voice from the night before. On the screen, the room was dim, but her face was as clear as day. She watched herself shake Terrence awake. She watched herself lean into his face and tell him that I, the man sitting 3 feet away from her, wanted to throw him into a home because he was a burden. As the video played, the color didn't just fade from Marcella's face, it drained out like someone had pulled a plug. For the first time in 36 years, I saw her look at me with genuine fear.
But it wasn't the fear of someone who was sorry. It was the fear of a predator that had finally been cornered in the light. The audio was crisp. When the video got to the part where she forced the blue medicine cup into his hand, I paused it. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. Her voice was trembling now, stripped of all that church lady confidence. "I was just trying to keep him close, Clarence. He was pulling away from me. He started wanting to go out more, wanting more independence. I'm his mother. He needs me. I had to make sure he knew I was the only one he could count on." "He needs a mother, Marcella, not a jailer, and certainly not a thief," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart felt like it was being squeezed by a vice. "You didn't do this for him. You did this so you could keep his bank account open for Deshawn. You drugged your own son so he wouldn't realize his mother was stealing his life." She went through every stage of manipulation in a matter of minutes. First, she denied it. Then she got angry, screaming that I was never around to help. Then, finally, she hit the victim phase. She started sobbing, claiming the stress of his accident had broken something inside her. She said she only gave him the sedative so she could get a moment of peace. But the bank statements were still sitting there between us. Stress doesn't explain moving $60,000 to a gambling brother over 8 months. Stress doesn't explain telling a brain-injured boy that his father hates him. I looked at the woman across from me and realized the Marcella I loved had probably been gone for a long time. I was just the last person to find out. "I'm calling the girls," I said, reaching for my cell phone. "No, Clarence, please," she begged, reaching across the table to grab my wrist. "Don't bring them into this. We can fix this. Just us."
It's way past just us, Marcella. They deserve to know who their mother really is. I didn't hesitate. I dialed our daughters, Tasha and Keisha, and put the phone right there on the table, face up. I hit the speakerphone button. When they answered, they sounded happy, expecting a normal check-in from their old man. "Hey, Pop, everything okay?" Tasha asked. "I'm sitting here with your mother," I said. "There's something she needs to tell you both, and I want you to listen very carefully." I made Marcella speak. I sat there and watched her struggle to find the words, while her daughter's voices shifted from confusion to horror. When she finally confessed, in a broken, weeping voice, to what she'd been saying to Terrence and where the money was going, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, the dam broke. Hearing the disgust in her daughter's voices seemed to hurt Marcella more than any threat of jail time ever could. Tasha, who was a registered nurse, was screaming. She was livid, not just as a daughter, but as a medical professional. "You were drugging him, Mom. With what? Do you have any idea what that does to his neural recovery? I'm coming over there right now." Keisha was quieter, her voice shaking with a cold, sharp disappointment that was even more cutting. "I don't even know who you are," she said. "Don't call me again. Don't check on my kids. Just stay away from us." Marcella collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, wailing. But I didn't feel any pity. I felt a massive weight lifting off my shoulders. For months, I had been living in a house of shadows, wondering why my son was disappearing and why my wife felt like a stranger. Now, the truth was out in the open. The shift in power was absolute. Marcella was no longer the devoted caretaker or the pious wife. She was a woman caught in a web of her own making.
Tasha arrived 40 minutes later, and she didn't even look at her mother. She walked straight past her and into Terrence's room to pack a bag.
"We're taking him to the hospital, Pop," Tasha said. Her eyes red from crying, but her hands steady. "We need to get his blood screened and get him away from her." I nodded. I looked at Marcella, who was still sitting at the table, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal. "Pack your things, Marcella. You aren't staying here tonight, or any other night." The hospital smelled like bleach and bad news, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Tasha stayed by Terrence's side while the doctors ran the toxicology screens. The results were a punch to the gut, high levels of benzodiazepines that no doctor had ever prescribed him. The hospital social worker had to get involved, and for a moment, I was terrified they'd think I was part of it. But I had the folder. I had the bank records and the video from that USB charger. When I showed the authorities what Marcella had been doing in the dead of night, the look on the social worker's face told me everything. I wasn't the suspect. I was the witness. I didn't waste a second. While Terrence was being monitored for withdrawal, I met with a lawyer. We filed for a legal separation and an emergency injunction to strip Marcella of her custodial rights. The judge didn't even hesitate once he saw the footage of her drugging a vulnerable adult. Marcella tried to fight it at first, sending her brother Deshaun to my house to talk sense into me. I met him on the porch with the police on speed dial. He took one look at my face and realized the old, quiet Clarence was gone. Marcella is currently staying with her sister, facing a criminal investigation for adult abuse and financial exploitation. My daughters had blocked her number. The house is quiet now, but it's a clean kind of quiet. The poison is gone, and the rebuilding has finally begun. Terrence came home after a week in detox. He was shaky, and his head was still a bit foggy, but the glassiness in his eyes was gone. He looked at the kitchen table, the place where the truth finally came out, and I could see the memories flickering behind his eyes. That first night back, I brought a tray of dinner up to his room. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same spot where Marcella used to sit and weave her lies. Terrence looked at me, his voice small and cracked. "Pop," he whispered, "you really don't want to send me away? Mama said you were looking at homes. She said I was taking up too much of your retirement." I felt a lump in my throat so big I could hardly swallow. I set the tray down and pulled my son into a hug. I cried for the first time since my own father passed away. "Son, your mother was sick in the head. I never said those things. I would live in a tent on the side of the road before I ever gave up on you." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a year. The tension left his shoulders, and he just leaned into me. He realized then that the monster wasn't his father. It was the person who claimed to be protecting him. We sat there for a long time, just father and son, finally safe in our own home. Justice in a family isn't like justice in the movies. There are no cheering crowds or dramatic music. There's just the quiet, heavy work of picking up the pieces that someone you loved tore down. Marcella is currently awaiting trial for financial exploitation and domestic abuse. Her brother Deshaun fled the state the moment the subpoenas were issued, proving that the family loyalty Marcella was buying was nothing but a transaction. Terrence is making strides I didn't think were possible a year ago. Without the sedatives clouding his brain, his speech is returning, and he's back in physical therapy 3 times a week. We go for walks on the porch every evening, and the silence between us isn't cold anymore. It's peaceful. I lost a wife of nearly 4 decades, and that's a scar I'll carry to my grave. But I saved my son. I'll spend the rest of my days making sure he knows that the truth is the only foundation worth building on. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about peace. And if this story touched you, subscribe right now. Because somewhere out there, another person is watching in silence, needing a reminder that they're not alone, and your one click might help them find it. Join the Graham Stories community today, because you never know when the next revelation will be the one that changes everything.